So here's your inlet, the pump, and then your inlet supply is that one on the end there. If you shut either of those valves while this is armed and running, you'll break it. Here's the motor, and here's the pump, and in between them is a seal so that it can spin, you know, it'll spin the motor without water all shooting out. But if that pump isn't wet and it's spinning, it'll overheat, it'll blow the seal, and a bunch of water will come out of there. And then I gotta come and take it apart and repair it. So you don't shut this unless you have it off over at the drive, but we can go over how to turn it off later. So if you shut that valve, it'll kill the pump. If you shut the outlet one, this one you guys can play with. This is your money valve. This is how you isolate the system when you got leaks and stuff. This one right here, that's the discharge. Okay. So right now, here, let's just go over components real quick. You got the inlet valve, motor and pump. This is an air release valve. It lets the air out if there's ever air in here. Then you've got a check valve, that's one way. Pressure gauge, pressure transducer, that tells the drive what the pressure is. Then you've got a bypass relief pressure valve right here. This will blow at about 95 to keep this from exploding at 100. So this will probably only explode at 150, but you don't want to chance it.
That pressure gets too high, water's going to shoot out of
that. This thing blasts, yeah, and it's a lot of water. Enough water to lower the pressure down.
Does it point downward? Or
it does, yeah. It's right here out of this screen opening right here. And the screen's on there for the mud wasps.
Great.
Because they'll ruin it over time. So that'll blast if the pressure is too high. This is primarily for tuning and testing, like when I was here today. You could put a hose on this and use it. You do have 80 PSI right here. So garden hoses don't really last that long on 80, but you could if you wanted. No harm from it. The system is designed 40 GPM is your minimum. So if you're using less than 40, it's going to do what it is right now, which is called sleeping. So if you're just running a garden hose, it'll wake up, it'll satisfy the garden hose, it'll run for a minute, and then it'll go right back to sleep. It wants to do about 40 GPM. It can do less, it's just going to wake up and go to sleep. Then you got flex connection, pressure tank. So that's everything out here, components-wise.
40 gallons per minute?
40 gallons per minute. So 60 was filling the tank, and whatever else was running. And I tested it with a hose on full blast over the fence. A hose on full blast, I'd probably get 25 or 30 GPM. And any around there, I wanted it to go to sleep. That goes back to that cooling, because if this doesn't have enough water moving past it, it'll get too hot. It'll make steam. Like it'll get really hot. That's why we do this brass on the inlet and the outlet, because if that gets hot, it'll just melt PVC. The other threat to this system is the tank running dry. So there's a protection in the drive, the controller, that if this thing uses too little amps, basically it's moving very little water, it should fault and shut down. But it's hard to tune that in a way that it won't nuisance trip. So what you've got to watch is the level in your tank and those two valves. So if you're ever in doubt that you might run out of water, you just turn this system off. Which I can show you how over here. What we'll usually do too, we'll put float switches in the supply tank, run them over to the controller. And then if the float switch hangs, the pump won't run.
Did you do that, or
no.
You're not?
No, yeah, because we would need a trench over to the tank, and that was our bid scope was just this pump installation. Okay. But that's the kind of stuff we add on, or do down the road. Until then, though, if you've got enough eyes on the system, because you're currently kind of running manually, you haven't really gotten into full-fledged automatic yet. You turn it on and fill the tank.
Right.
And As long as you have water in there, you're good. And check it when you're good. But if you're ever in doubt, I would just leave this off if it's not supervised, like at night. You know, if you had a massive leak, because it doesn't care. If it sees the pressure below 70, it's going to come on and run. And that low load threshold should trip it, but I wouldn't depend on it as much as I would a float switch hanging in the tank. Let's see. Yeah, so let's go look at the drive. I'll show you that. This is the drive. It's fed from a breaker in here. This should just stay on all the time. That's the cooling fan. That's normal. If you hit this red button, it's going to disable it. And if you hit this green button, it's going to enable it. There's an itty bitty little green light right here. That's all the feedback you have if it's enabled or disabled. There, it's disabled, and there it's enabled. It should always say either 00, or if the pump's running, it'll say the speed of the motor on here in hertz out of 60. So if it's running at full speed, like you're using a lot of water, it'll say 60. And the three pieces of information you have is the speed of the motor, the pressure in the system, and the flow out of that water meter. So you can say, we're using 110 GPM, it's not even at 60 hertz yet, we can use more water, and we're at 80 PSI. Or we're at 140 GPM, and we're at 70 PSI, and it's parked at 60 hertz. That means it's at full speed, but your pressure's not dropping. Hey, you're all right. You only got 70.
What's
so
hertz?
Hertz is the speed of the motor.
Okay.
So this thing that's all it's doing is varying the speed of the motor. It sees the pressure go down, it speeds up. It sees the pressure go up, it slows down, and then it watches it and babies it back and forth until it's in a nice little sweet spot. So that's all you really have to do over here is those two buttons. You got the manual, and all the settings I put in it are in here. I would hold on to this. I got the pump curve.
Okay.
I don't know if I gave you the pump curve. It's over there. I'll give you that too. But the pump curve just says about the same thing. 80 PSI, 110 GPM. That's your sweet spot. Anything less than 40 and you're way out there. And then its max pressure, I think, was 108 PSI. So it probably couldn't blow that tank, but we still put the pressure relief on there just in case. Okay, so we're at 80 PSI. We're gonna just use a little bit of water. You always open these slowly.
Okay.
In big systems like this, you never do anything quickly. You always crack it a little, and then a little more, and then a little more. Coming down to 70, at about 68 or so, it wakes up. Now, because I've got it throttled here, it's gonna bounce a little bit. But when you're using water out in the system, it shouldn't bounce very much. So now we're running, we're at 80 PSI, so we're gonna open it all the way. Now it's going to drop a lot because a lot of water is going through. Got to satisfy all of them. We're down to 60. It'll take a minute and it'll climb back up. It's probably a 15. So it's at 60 hertz right now. So it's working as hard as it can to meet the demand.
Okay.
We're already up to 70 now. So in a moment it'll come to 80 and then it'll kind of throttle back a little bit and just ride on that. And that's it, like, that's just it running. It's gonna feed these, it's gonna fill the tank. If you've got a massive leak somewhere, it's just gonna throw water on the ground. So that's how you can tell if you've got leaks. Shut that tank valve, shut all your zones, and leave this valve open. And the pressure right here shouldn't flinch. If that holds, then you know your entire system doesn't have any leaks.
Can this leak set time parameters too for
to operate within?
Yeah.
I don't believe this one can. You'd have to go up to like a 40 horse or a larger size. But we just put it on top. And then, so once this reaches its its set point pressure and it slows down enough, once it goes below a certain speed for 15 seconds, it'll fall asleep. There is a way we could put an external timer, the same way we would do a float switch, and just interrupt the run enable. So you, just like how you can wire a float switch in it, you could wire a toggle switch, you could wire like a laundry timer or whatever.